Welcome. This is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of April 22nd, 2013. It's about 2 o'clock. May I have roll call, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Vidor?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Shire?
Here.
Commissioner Tufankian?
Here.
And Commissioner Vartanian?
Here.
Thank you, all presents.
Thank you. 2 on the agenda is that the posting of the agenda was posted on or before Monday, April 15th, on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. Item number 3 is approval of the meeting minutes from March 25th, 2013. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes? The only one I saw was number 5, under old business. The last sentence has 2 periods. Minor correction.
Thank you so much.
The other question I had actually relates to 6, under consideration 1. Was the airplane also a consideration, or just public access to the visitor center?
My memory is it was just public access because the airplane we have to treat like furniture, so it's not, the building, but it's their intention to bring some plane there.
Okay, that's all I had. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
All right. Commissioner Vidor?
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Tufankian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Madam Chair Shire?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, oral communications. We don't have any today that are in general nature, so we'll skip to number 5. Comments from commissioners. Are there any today?
I have one small thing. Last month, the Commission voted for the restoration and refurbishment of Grand Central Air Terminal, Glendale's pride. This coming weekend, Grand Central's neighbor airport in Burbank, the Bob Hope Airport, will host, over the weekend of April 26th, 27th, and 28th, a B-17 Flying Fortress, a B-24 Liberator, the last flying one in the world, and a P-51 Mustang, a plane that Grand Central Airport refurbished during and after the war. All of these aircraft will be flying over the weekend, and all of these types of aircraft flew in and out of Grand Central Airport during and after the war. So if you want to get a feel for what Grand Central was like during the war, I invite you to go see these historic flying aircraft. For more information, you can contact online Wings of Freedom Tour 2013 or the Collings Foundation.
Excellent, thank you.
I'd like to talk about a program that is put together by Neighborhood Services, and the contest is called I Love My Neighborhood. And I'm very proud to say one of my students, Ariana Keshishian, won this year's competition. And if we can put her poster up, maybe for everyone to see.
Yeah, GTV 6.
Oh, okay.
Calling GTV 6.
Perfect, thank you. Just want to say she is a bright, talented, and very creative student with a great future ahead of herself. She wrote down ideas for, I want to say many weeks, and sketched many designs before she came up with this poster, and I think it really embodies the Jewel City. And she has several of Glendale's main buildings and most important buildings. For example, she has the Alex Theater, I think she has City Hall, she has the Brand Library, she has GCC. So a lot of the important buildings in there she's incorporated. Now about the project, the I Love My Neighborhood contest began in 1993 with the intention of teaching students about civic responsibility and their environment and how to keep their environment clean. And this year's theme was Keep Glendale Clean in 2013. And I believe they receive over 10,000 posters. So that's probably a very daunting deal to select their winners through that. But the winners are unveiled in the award ceremony, which is usually in end of March or early April. And I just hope that they go on with this program because it's got a dual importance, both to teaching civic responsibility and also teaching students how to create an effective poster. And I'd like to also add that Shamlian has won first place before in 2001. Actually, it was my niece, Sarah Kalamkarian. And we've won second place a couple of times, and we also have won most applicants. So thank you, and I hope we go on with this.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Okay. We'll move to item number 6, old business. A, consideration of commissioner-generated proposals for future discussions regarding the HPC policies and goals.
And if you look at our chart that we have every month, you'll see that 2 of the items that were brought forward last month are on today's agenda. And we're open for new ideas in the future.
Okay.
But we'll be working on those in the near future.
Great, thank you. Any discussion on this item?
I just have a question.
Go ahead.
Question on some of the, one of the things that was already handled, specifically the policy of naming Glendale registered designated properties, and it says naming policy was developed, which we all remember, and then it will be communicated to City Council and staff reports. And if you could just refresh our memory about how was it communicated and voted upon, or how, what the transaction between us and the City Council was, and where this policy is codified or
And
documented.
in the Historic Preservation Commission ordinance, the commissions and different boards and commissions in general are allowed to develop internal policies that they see fit, that they vote on, that fulfill their mission, and those don't have to go to City Council for ratification when it's
right,
kind of
yeah.
just an in-house
Understand
policy.
that.
What we do is, you should have it in your commissioner handbooks. There's a section for those things in your handbooks, and if for some reason you don't, we have it in print, so we could add that. And then when we go to City Council, we kind of remind them, just during the kind of the staff presentation, that we're following the commission's policy of using the first owner's name, or if we deviate from that, we'd explain it. So
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion?
And Jay, that's a reminder that happens each time you bring something before City Council, right? Each time.
Probably, I may have, sometimes if it's an obvious one, we may not focus on it, but if we're deviating from the policy, we might call more attention to it to kind of explain.
So,
But we should, and it's not a big deal to do it. I just can't
Yeah.
say I've always
No,
done it.
that's the idea.
okay. It was only that, we all were here, I think. Well, maybe, I'm not sure Lorna was, but maybe we all have this in here and we remember the discussion, but if anybody were to look in their handbook, it wouldn't necessarily be there unless they were a new member of
Yeah,
the commission.
new commissioners will get it in their handbook.
Okay.
And then we lay out each step that we had talked about. So.
And I can confirm that it is in my handbook. I actually did see it over the weekend.
No,
Okay.
good
So there
commissioner.
it is.
Closing the loop.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is 7, new business, and 7A, advisory design review for the proposed rehabilitation of the Glendale Central Library.
And before we bring the project team up, I just wanted to quickly introduce this, reminding the Commission that this is an advisory design review hearing because this building isn't designated. It's the city's and the library's intention to bring this forward as a Glendale Register nomination in the future. But the work that you're looking at is work that you should assume this work will have occurred, by the time that you get this as a nomination. That said, all of your comments are going to be forwarded to the series of hearings that are going to be held on this. The Library Arts and Culture Commission is going to see this. And then City Council ultimately has final design review authority because this is in the downtown specific plan area. So all DSP buildings get heard by City Council. In my staff report, I kind of went through, and I know there's been, questions, of concern. Does this meet the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation? Would there be a loss or potential effect on designation at the local Glendale level or at the state level for the California Register. In all cases, I think that there is no problem in terms of this project meeting the highest level of preservation standards while making some changes to a building that's really important to the city. And as a preservationist, it's really important for me that we remember that preservation is about change, but it's about managing change so that it doesn't have negative impacts on historic structures. It isn't something where we're trying to prevent change or, seal something in amber. So that's very important for me. And then just by way of comparison, I just wanted to remind the Commission that in projects it's looked at in recent years, including the project for the seismic retrofit of this building, as well as the Brand Library project, significant interventions have successfully been made on some of our buildings, whether they're designated or like this building. It was a building of historic interest at the time, but wasn't designated. And I might even argue that some of the changes at Brand and at this building are more serious in their impact on the actual fabric of the building than what we're looking at with Central Library. So as you go forward and listen to the presentation, if you're thinking about those things and you have any questions or, if those comparisons may help you in understanding, what levels of change the Commission historically has accepted on some of these projects, it might be helpful. And so if you don't have any questions specifically about the staff report, or we can address those later, I'll just introduce Cindy Cleary from the Department of Libraries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, commissioners, city staff, and members of the public. I'm really excited. I think you all know I'm very excited to be able to introduce this project to you. The building, as you know, is 40 years old, and it's a fine example of brutalist architecture that we will be sensitive to. We have been sensitive to as we've gone through this project. Before I introduce the architect, I wanted to tell you what my goal is in the project. It's threefold. One is to really respond to the urban context that we now live in. The downtown area obviously is a lot different than it was in 1973, and through the design we want to really outreach through the design to what's going on both to the north, the south, the east, and the west of us. Then secondly, as I said, it's an important building. It's important not only to Glendale, it's important to Los Angeles as one of the few examples of brutalist architecture. So through the project, we have been very sensitive to that, and I hope you'll agree. And then thirdly, we need to respond to the changing needs of library service. So through the design, we can increase the amount of technology that we have, that we need. Obviously, that wasn't there in 1973. Improve signage, increase the number of community spaces through conference rooms, quiet spaces that the public is desiring. So a lot of functional issues that we've been trying to address through the design. And I'll let our architect talk more about the design itself. So let me introduce her. Deborah Gerard is from the Gruen Associates. She and her team worked with us on the Brand Library project, and I will turn the podium over to her.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get this all right. Thank you, Commissioners. I really appreciate the opportunity to make a presentation to you. As Cindy said, my name is Deborah Gerard. I'm a partner at Gruen Associates, and we are the architects on the project. With me is also another one of my partners, Laurie Schlossberg, who will be available to address questions should you have them. And it's a fairly long presentation. I apologize. I appreciate your indulgence. I'll try and go quickly through it so that I don't take up too much of your time. And if there's anything I go over too quickly, please just stop me. General outline is we're going to talk about the project goals, the original design intent, the cumulative revisions that have taken place since the building was originally opened in the 70s, review the changes that we're proposing, and then take any of your questions. And the project goals, and Cindy just talked about many of these, so I won't dwell on them. Historic preservation is certainly there from the standpoint of maintaining future eligibility for this project. And so it wasn't so much of a preservation project as making sure that we didn't do any damage that would prevent future designation, and to try and do some good in the course of that all from a preservation standpoint. In the original design intent, the original designer, contrary to many people's opinion or belief, was not actually Welton Beckett. He died in 1969 prior to the design of this project. This was done by Marvin Taft, who is now a fellow with the AIA, who was the lead designer in Welton Beckett and Associates office. I know Marvin and have had the pleasure to talk with him about this building. And through the course of those discussions, we were able to reinforce what our understanding just intuitively by being in the building was. What was really important to him was that this was two buildings, so the two sides where the stacks are that are double levels, two buildings connected by a great room. The great room was ultimately the most important thing to him. The administration office, which is up on the second floor, and I apologize, I'll show you drawings to make this all make more sense as we go through. The administration office was like a bridge going across the space, so that light and view was of ultimate desire to him. So lots of light in the building, views to the outside. It was a building designed from the inside out. The shapes took place from their function. And it was a building that was intended to be carved out of concrete. So the exterior facade, which is predominantly concrete, and the structure are all expressed, even to the point where the fact that there are no metal mullions in the main facade. There are some at the entryway, the existing entryway, but none in the main facade. That was absolutely critical to Marv and his sense of this being carved out of concrete. And then lastly, that the building systems were exposed. So the air conditioning are in vertical air fountains throughout the space, and the ceilings are left exposed so you can see the structure up above. But over time, things have migrated a bit. This is the picture that we use as our guide for what the feeling that we're trying to get back in this building. This was a picture of when the building opened, and it's just beautiful, elegant, simple, very clear space, and that is absolutely the qualities that we endeavor to restore to this space. There's a great feeling of openness, the original second floor balcony. So I should tell you, you're looking from the book stack area across the way to where there used to be an opened walkway behind a glass guardrail, which gave a great feeling of openness to the space. And it's hard to tell from the quality of this projection, but if you look at the original imagery, you can actually see daylight in view on the outside of the windows through the administration area. And the book stacks were all kept underneath the balcony. None of them migrated out into the open space, so that the open space was really an open space where people could read and enjoy each other's company. It was surprisingly one of the early libraries where the hush-hush quiet notion that was common in the 70s in libraries was not in place here. In the 90s, the building underwent a major renovation. And one of the first things that happened is that balcony I was just showing you got filled in with a solid wall for good reason. None of these changes were for not good reasons, but just show you some of the migration of change. The circulation process at the entry and exit was altered. Originally, you came into the building through the east door, but the way that you exited was through a different door on the northeast corner, so that you had to funnel past a circulation desk. That end of the building where the circulation desk is now was completely open. Mm-hmm. That got closed in during this renovation in the 90s. And then the bullpen where the librarians used to be got expanded and turned into a reference area, so now it is a rather big mass in the middle of the space. Another change took place in 2004, and it's fundamentally what you see reflected here today. It starts with the staircase being filled in. So originally the stack area had a big, long staircase. It was just one large, wide staircase. And that got filled in with platforms with glass guardrails. The stack started migrating, again, not through any malintent, just kind of part of how buildings evolve over time. And the character of the furnishings changed over time. Those great beautiful Eames chairs. There's a few of them left, but in general, it got replaced by plastic and plastic laminate type furniture, which is, again, not surprising in a public institution. The railings were added in 1994 as metal railings, and so the character was originally wood, changed to metal. Actually, there's some of the wood railings are still there, but there are metal on top of them. A stair to the second floor was added, and that's, again, part of that second floor opening up. Originally, there wasn't a need for that. And but as the second floor opened up, it became more public space, which was beneficial to the users. There's a lot of dark voids where light fixtures are not functioning, and sprinkler system was added that was originally not there. The circulation desk area got filled in, so where there used to be a big wide opening to the east entry, it's now filled in with circulation desk and soffits and the like. And unfortunately, for the administration office to properly function, they have drapes drawn most of the time over the glass, that the multiple levels of glass preventing that view of light to come back into the main space. The exterior is fundamentally exactly the way it was back when it was originally designed. I mentioned the exit that used to take place, that used to exist. The storefront for it is still there. It's just not commissioned as an exit anymore. And the space behind that is now staff area. This is the east side of the building. Railings were added in the 90s to help prevent a safety issue around the tree well. And again, a mention of those original entry doors, which are now used for both entry and exit. And the reason this is significant is that when you exited out the building, you didn't actually have to walk around the tree well in the original design. In the current design, you end up having to circulate around the tree well, especially people who are less ambulatory. Along Harvard, the view of the building has just gotten filled in a bit so that you can't really see the architecture anymore. You see a big mass of trees. The landscape is a little overgrown. So that's kind of just setting the stage for what's there right at the moment. In terms of what we're proposing, first off is the fact that the urban context has changed. And people are not only coming by car from to this building, but when they are coming by car, the predominant parking is actually not behind the building as it originally was, but it's in a parking structure across the street, across Harvard, where the library validates. So people can park for up to 3 hours and come across the street, but when they come across the street, they can't enter the library because the entrance is around to the east side. There's also a center of gravity for the downtown Glendale area that is centric on Brand Avenue, and hopefully in the very near future on Maryland as the Arts District comes into play. And then there's also, as you all are probably aware, a Paseo planned for the south side of the library, which would be a big green space, open space that would connect the Adult Recreation Center and the library over to the Neon Museum and Brand Avenue. And so with this change in the urban context, it seems appropriate to allow the library to take advantage of that change and to respond to that change. And so we're proposing to relocate the entries. Or relocate the entry to a pair of entries, one on the north side of the building, which would be the major entry, and that would allow people coming from that parking structure to get easier access into the building, but also respond to that center of gravity being on Brand Avenue or towards Brand Avenue. We want to put in a more minor entry on the south side that would allow people who are in the future Paseo to enter the building from the Paseo, as well as be responsive to the Adult Recreation Center. We also see an opportunity to create usable outdoor space. As Marvin said, told me about the building being designed from the inside out, the outside was very important from a character, being able to see it, being able to experience it. So the opportunity to have outdoor space that is like an extension of the indoor space was something that he was very supportive of. This is a little larger view of the north entry, and so just to orient you, the library building is below, is that dark gray down below. North is up, and the parking structure is up at the top of the page across the street. And there would be a new entry vestibule, some stairs that are easy to walk up, so no more than 6-inch rise, and a slope path that is actually less shallow than an accessible ramp to make it very easy for less ambulatory people to get up to that level as well. And this is a view of what that might look like. The new entry is in wood to contrast with the concrete, not trying to be a part of the original building, just to be compatible with it. At Marv's suggestion, we actually made a little detailing change to the entry facade, which I was very excited about, to allow a little strip of glass in there to separate the wood from the concrete structure so that it clearly reads as two separate things. And one of the things that Marv commented favorably on was that we were treating these interventions like furniture, as opposed to like changes to his building. They were all like furnishings that were finely crafted. On the south, this would be a picture of the south entry. So in this case, north is still up. The library is up at the top of the page, at the top of that red arrow. And the adult recreation center would be below us. The buff color is the parking. Right above that is a sidewalk, and then a staircase that leads to a flat minor plaza. It's really the top landing entry to the entry to the building, and then a new pair of entry doors. And there is an accessible ramp at this elevation, at this entry as well. And this is a little view of what that would look like. I probably should have pointed out that most of the existing planter that's there remains and is just replanted with new planting. So the planter off on the left side of the screen is the existing planter. And then there's the east side where the existing entry is. And on this east side, there is the big well, which is a bit of a security issue. People like to sleep in there. It's fairly protected. And if it's a security issue now while it's an active entry, and it causes people to be a little cautious about walking through there at times, we thought it was important to decommission it so that we could address that maintenance and physical security issue. But we're doing it in a manner that's reversible. So our intent is to keep the existing well, line it with plastic, fill it with dirt, put plants in there, and if the well ever wants to come back, it can be done. No actual original material will be disturbed. You can see the light gray shape that's circling. The tree is in the center. Let's see, I've got a pointer here someplace.
I'll get it.
Okay, thanks. The big tree is in the center, and there's a little section detail up above. I apologize. It's probably a little too light on this projection to see very well. But the concrete band that forms the outside of the well right now would continue to be expressed. It would just be expressed within the planting so that shape, which is very iconic, could remain. And the railing would get to be removed, which is a bonus. That railing was not original to the building. It was added in the 90s, and would be better without it. And this is a little picture of what that would look like. So there will still be a path. Those doors would still be able to be used for special events. Maybe there's a special event in the auditorium. It would be used as a staff entrance, but it would not be used by the general public on a regular basis. So then we get to the plans. This is the great space, as Marv called it. We were calling it the community living room. Same intent, that it is the grand space that people get to congregate in. The orange color is the big double high space. The lighter orange color is an area that has an overhang over it where the second floor comes out to that line. And then the pinker color on the left is the upper bookstack area. Really allowing this space to just be as open as possible. And so moving those book stacks out of the main double high space and letting it be back to what that original image was, where it's very comfortable seating and very elegant space. And then in the stack area, spreading the stacks so that there are opportunities to get the light from the west wall, where there's windows on the west wall, back into the main space, so that we're really connecting in both directions with light and view. On the second floor, we are relocating the administrative office, which was in that bridge that Marvin originally described. And so that bridge would be converted to more reading space that would be an extension of the room below. It would be a little quieter. It's not in as big a volume, and that's something that, as Cindy mentioned, the public is really interested in. And by removing the admin space over to the west side, we do a few things. One is we're consolidating all the offices together. There's not enough space in the administration wing right now for all the offices. The second is that we're removing that impediment to seeing daylight off on the south side through the main space. And so it opens it back up again, as it would have been if the drapes weren't always drawn in the administrative offices right now. And so really maintaining that access to daylight and view. And we're also providing a window to continue the spreading of daylight into the children's room, which originally was opened up to that main space, or originally that facade was opened up. The children's room wasn't directly opened up, but allowing that light to be borrowed by the children's room. There are some accessibility upgrades that we need. Probably the most controversial of them is the elevator, which is off on the left side. Right now there's not a code-compliant elevator that accesses all floors, and one is needed. This is both for to meet the law and meet code, but also just to provide the right amenity to the patrons. And putting an elevator in is a very difficult thing in a building like this. And we studied a lot of different opportunities for putting the elevator in. If we tucked it into the floor plates that exist right now, we would have to do a major intervention to those floor plates to cut holes in them, disturb the existing historic structural material, and penetrate up through the multiple floors. And sadly, even doing that wouldn't actually get you access to all of the levels you need. This building is a bit tricky because the stack area is about 3 feet higher than the main floor. And you need to get accessibility from the main floor up to the second floor and also down to the basement. And so it actually seemed, from a historical material perspective, probably the most appropriate to utilize the double high space that already exists and be able to connect to all the floors. The elevator fits perfectly within one of the large coffers that is in the main space, so it doesn't extend past that coffer, and it just slips inside, again, treating that elevator like a bit of furniture and wrapping it in wood so that it's treated more like a piece of furniture and not like a special object of its own. New staircase going up to the second floor helps to reinforce that connection between downstairs and upstairs where the two reading rooms are connected. And then the toilet rooms are expanding, which again is necessary to make them ADA compliant, meet code, and also allow the library one set of toilet rooms that can be easily controlled from the vandalism that happens when you have uncontrolled facilities like that in a public building of this nature. Just to be clear, those toilet rooms project into the space that was originally part of the east entry, but also so did the circulation desk. And so we are removing the circulation desk and giving that space freeing up that space to be utilized for the toilets. So it's not exactly one for one, but we're trying as close as we can to make sure that that openness that's there now is maintained, even though there's not an actual exit or entry there. Oops, I just went the wrong way, didn't I? And this is an image of what that space would look like. Again, trying to get back to the character and the quality of that original space while having very discrete interventions of a wood stair that's treated like a nice piece of furniture, a wood elevator that's treated like a nice piece of furniture. There is a clock that is beloved and currently resides on the lower level. It is transparent, so you can see through it from both sides. If you're looking at it from the great space, you see the clock face. If you're looking at it from the backside, you see the reverse of the clock face, the backside of the clock, and the box where the mechanism is. We were proposing to provide it a prominent space on top of the elevator to keep it in its same general location, rise it up on the elevator enclosure, would stand off from the face of the elevator so that there would be a distance that we could see that transparency, illuminate from behind so that you can see the transparency, and in doing so, hopefully making it more important in the space than it even is today. As I said, we had the opportunity to meet with the original designer and discuss these interventions. He asked a lot of questions. He was very favorable towards what we were doing. And his overall commentary was that he felt like we were maintaining his original intent, honoring the building by not touching the structure and the facade that was really critically important to him. He agreed with the idea of not breaking that slab to put the elevator in it, but rather utilizing the double high space to put the elevator in it. He thought the entry change made a lot of sense, and he agreed with the idea of coming in off of the north. As I didn't even understand this before, but I found out that the original building that was on that site, which was the Union High School, had its entry off the north. So there's even some historical precedents not related directly to this building for the entry in the north. Marv thought that relocating the administration was an improvement. He said, wow, that's great. It really opens up the light. That's what I wanted. So perhaps that's a positive intervention. And that the existing entry wasn't so important to him. A lot of discussion has been had about the entry sequence. He said, yeah, that wasn't really the big deal. The big deal was arriving in this big space, not how you got there. And so in general, he felt like we were handling this in a manner that was appropriate, while that's just his opinion. And from a historical perspective, I understand that has its own place. It's not everything, but we thought that was important to bring to you as well. And so with that, any questions I can answer for you? I guess I should probably make one last statement, just because there's been a fair amount of discussion, inadvertently so, relative to this project that probably stemmed from my actions. So let me just speak to them a moment. And that is relative to our historical consultant. We do have a historic consultant. They are under contract. It is Historic Resources Group. I will say they are recently under contract, and that was, something on my end that it was an informality I should not have taken, and it has seemed to be blown out of proportion. So to that, I've apologized to them for that. I just wanted to bring that to you because I know that discussion has come to your attention as well. We have met with them. They will prepare a report for us. They have not done one yet, but we also hadn't asked them to do so yet before recently. And so they have given us advice on what we were doing. There are some details that we will take a look at as a result of discussion with them. but in general, they did not give us any reason to believe that what we are proposing here would invalidate the eligibility of this project. And there, I know, have been several letters written. Some of them have some inaccuracies. I'll be happy to discuss the inaccuracies if anyone is interested in going through the details. So, do you guys have any questions for us?
Should we take questions now and then the next speakers? Okay.
Yeah. And then you open up the
floor. Are there any questions?
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
Could we look at the south side? Or I just want to understand better, originally, the parking that we see today, is that how the parking was always configured?
Yes,
for
as
this
far as we can tell, yeah.
building?
Yeah.
Okay.
and that parking area will go away at some point when the Paseo connecting to the Americana comes through that area.
Okay, so that was my next question. So, yeah, presumably, okay. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
The elevator that's in the Great Hall, the new one,
Yes.
I think it's perfectly placed where it should have been a long time ago. But I'm concerned it goes to all 3 floors.
It does.
Down to the basement, but there won't be access to the public by going to the bottom floor.
Card key access.
Card key access.
So if you are supposed to be going to the ground floor, swipe your card.
It's the only way you
access.
can get in.
Yeah. And it's the same card swipe that allows staff to get into the building as well after hours.
But there is an elevator now that goes to all 3 floors.
There is. It's just undersized.
Yeah.
And it actually accesses the stack area.
Right.
So it actually doesn't hit the main floor.
Correct.
So.
Yes. By a few feet.
Right, by a few feet, exactly.
How open are you to make changes according to the historic resource group? Because I understand that they've been involved maybe a little bit after the fact, where typically we'd see them involved and really creating what the design would be with input. So now that you're quite far along, could you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And first I should say, had this been more of a preservation project, we certainly would have had them involved earlier on. But with the intent being to maintain eligibility, it was not a current historic building. That was in part why their involvement came at a later date. And we work extremely well with those guys, working on an actual Weldon Beckett designed building renovation with them as well currently. And we work extremely well with them. We've worked on many other projects together. We have a good rapport, and we're very open to their suggestions. And Christy had some suggestions for us that we're going to take back and see if we can possibly figure out how to make them work.
The other question I had for you, is there any consideration to continuity between how the 2 entries would be addressed, so that now that you're changing the entries, so that's 2 completely new ones, one on north and one on south, that they are dressed similarly, or so that you may know that you'll see kind of a wooden jewel box if that's what you've designed on the north, and on the south see something
Similar.
or something that could speak to these are the entrances.
Yeah, and the answer is absolutely. And when we were hoping that the Paseo was going to have an earlier appearance, we actually had a slightly larger south plaza, which allowed us a little greater space to have a more similar entry, and that is our desire. But yes, trimming it with wood, I think that would be completely appropriate. And then if the Paseo ever comes and we can expand that plaza, and it wouldn't want to expand tremendously, but a little bit, then it could actually be an entry vestibule. So on the north side of the building, there is a vestibule, meaning 2 pairs of doors. That doesn't exist in the building right now. It is a weather protection, especially from wind and dirt and things like that, especially with sliding doors, which is what is in the library. They don't do a great job of keeping things out, and it also helps to address the acoustics. So there are a double pair of doors on the north side where the prevailing winds are and where the street noise is. On the south side, we would put in a vestibule if we could, if there was space to, without being too much of an intervention. And so instead, we're putting in a pair of swinging doors, which do a better job of environmental protection. And but certainly the opportunity to alter that, and we'll certainly look at the detailing of that to make sure that there's a common family of materials.
My last question for you. On the main kind of entry open area floor, it looks like now there is almost a quarter of the space kind of designated for stairs, ramps, elevator. How do you feel about that ratio, at least what it's looking like kind of in plan and in your perspectives?
And I have this strong desire to take the little hatch pattern off here so that you could actually read that. I believe that you might be looking at an older rendition of drawings. And
just to clarify, the area of the ramp adjacent on the elevator side is scaled back quite a bit from what you saw in the proposal that was sent out.
Thank
Yeah, so if you look, you can see if you maybe you look at the screen on the left,
Yes.
it's easier to see. It's much more compact and pressed against the.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
We heard that. We heard that, and we acted quickly. And it was something we shared as well. So we think this is a better way to do it. So
Thank you.
Deborah, if you would, since this is the presentation that HPC has is the one that was at the community meeting last week,
yes.
A week ago, and since that was a comment that was brought up, would you mind just sort of clarifying some of the changes that were made on that stair between in your design?
Yeah, sure.
In the past week?
I'm not sure where to point to. Can you do the mouse thing?
Yeah, I'll do the mouse.
So previously there was a double stair, one that short stair came in from the north, in from the south, paralleling the ramp, along with a little seating overlook. I think in our thoughts was, wow, what a great place to sit and overview the space. But it was feeling like it was a bit much. And we heard that comment from several people, and we took it to heart. And we thought that platform wasn't so vital to the space. It was taking up valuable real estate. And we pulled the stair back, so there is still a stair that is getting you up to the stack area in the location of the ramp, so that everyone is, all of the circulation is coming together, but it's much more simple and straightforward. Streamlined, yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I hope that, as the discussion happens, it usually generates questions, so we can, I
Sure.
feel my questions might come as an outgrowth of the discussion, and that we'll have an opportunity to reopen the hearing and
Happy to do so.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We have another public speaker, Larry Schlossberg.
Thank you, Debbie. Did a terrific job.
Okay.
Expressing the
You'll pass.
views of your.
Then next would be Greg Grammer.
Good afternoon, Commission and City staff. My name is Greg Grammer, and I'm the president of the Glendale Historical Society. And first off, I'd like to thank Cindy Cleary for reaching out to me back in December to show me some of the ideas and the preliminary plans, and then also for meeting with our board of directors in March. And also I'd like to thank Jay Platt for always being available and answering questions and providing information. I'd just like to say that it's important to note that the Glendale Historical Society understands that the city's historic resources cannot be preserved in aspect, that buildings must continue to evolve so that they work for their owners and for the community as a whole, just as the way we live and conduct our business changes over time. Indeed, the Historical Society has a track record of championing and encouraging the adaptive reuse and rehabilitation of a number of historic resources. Most recently, the Grand Central Air Terminal, the Seeley's Building, Masonic Temple, Brand Library, and this building. And the Historical Society believes that the library in its current form, or its current state, is eligible for listing on the Glendale and California registers, and possibly future listing on the National Register. And the city clearly shares this view, as the property was surveyed in its historic survey for the Downtown Specific Plan, and the library was determined to be eligible for the state and the Glendale Register. Now, given that Glendale has a limited number of buildings that are potentially eligible for listing on the National Register, we feel that it is essential that there can be no doubt or dispute that any proposed changes meet the Secretary of Interior standards to ensure that the building remains eligible for listing. Now, throughout our open and transparent engagement with both the library and the city, we have made very clear that we're prepared to support the proposed changes, provided that these changes do not undermine the overall architectural integrity of the building and its eligibility for listing on the state and potentially National Register. So we're disappointed that our open and transparent engagement has not been replicated by Gruen. Their lack of veracity with both the city and the community is more than disappointing. It potentially undermines the integrity of the process as a whole. At the community workshop on April 8th, we expressed our concerns about making sure that the building's architectural integrity was maintained and its eligibility was maintained for listing on the state, local and state and national registers. And we were told that Gruen had engaged the services of a historic preservation consultant, Historic Resources Group, from the beginning of the process. And now we find out that they just now entered into a contract with HRG. And so my question is, why isn't HRG here today? What are their views on this? And when did Gruen enter into this agreement with HRG? Without the input of such an independent consultant, we have serious concerns that the proposed changes will undermine the architectural integrity of the building and its eligibility for listing. One of the things that's not addressed in the staff report is the Department of Interior standards as it relates to spatial relationships. Changes that are made to distinctive materials and features and spaces and spatial relationships are to be avoided to meet the conditions of the interior standards. So we have concerns that the proposed alterations may not be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards and therefore may not be categorically exempt from environmental review as required by CEQA. So it's our position that it's essential that Gruen Associates bring on board an independent qualified preservation consultant, and I'm happy to hear that they've now engaged the services of HRG, and we'll be interested in hearing what HRG's findings are with respect to the proposed changes and how it relates to maintaining the building's eligibility for listing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we'll close the public session and open it up to...
Actually, if I could just add one quick thing. Yeah. I just wanted to remind the commissioners and let the public know that we also received a letter from Bruce Beckett of Bruce Beckett and Associates, an architect, son of Welton Beckett, who was involved with this project early on in Bruce Beckett's career. And I left a copy of this with each commissioner. I don't know that you want me to read it into the record, but we have received this.
Would you? I'd like it read in the record.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to paraphrase or read the whole letter?
Paraphrase.
Okay. I'll try to do that quickly. I didn't plan, but basically, Bruce Beckett is saying that he personally worked on some of the drawings and coordinated shop drawings for the library. He always appreciated its design and personally knew the entire team that contributed to the landmark design. Obviously, that would include Marv Taff. In response to an inquiry, he had a few comments, and he was reviewing the April 8th set of drawings. He believes, number one, that the indirect access, which he's referring to, the access from what he called the side facade on the east, he says was deliberate. Since walking down a tree-lined path created a sense of calm and intrigue as opposed to entering off a busy street. He says the approach to the building was part of the experience and enjoyment of going to the library. It seems a shame to lose this amenity. I'm not sure that we're going to lose the ability to see the building from that side, but obviously the entry is shifting. The proposed additional entrance at the south will be difficult to control for security. I don't think that's an HPC issue, so unless you want me to read that, I'll skip that one. The rendering of the main facade on the building is very vague as to what is proposed. It appears to be a rough design study to look at shapes and develop a focus for the entry. I think the design is further along than he's suggesting, and if the commission has a question about whether it's far enough along, I think you can address that with the architects. The original large open area at the interior is a bold statement, uncluttered and clean in design. The addition of an elevator and the stair detracts from the original statement. I believe it would be beneficial to place the stair on the interior of the second floor, and you heard from the designer why there was belief that that was not an appropriate location. Number 5 is the original design of the second floor walkway should be retained. I believe that means that the openness and possibly the administrative office. He says this was part of the open feeling of a learning, inspiring environment, and I'm not sure that the new proposal doesn't maintain that. And then he finds several things of the presentation that he agrees with, including signage and wayfinding, that the landscape has overgrown, adding more seating in the stacks, structural upgrades, enlarged restrooms, HVAC and ADA compliance. And then finally, he has a question about the phasing of the construction, which also isn't so much an issue for this commission.
Thank you. Okay, any comments or discussion from commissioners? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't know that any of us really wants to start this discussion.
But you've done so.
I have a lot of thoughts, and I almost don't know where to start. I'll start by saying that I think the proposed designs are good. I think they make sense. I understand that buildings and their uses change over time. And I think the goal that's trying to be achieved, in my opinion, is a difficult one. I think it came up in the presentation that the main space was the most important space of this building. And although it was said, I think, by the architect who worked on the design, that the experience of entering on the east and proceeding through this, lower height corridor into the grand room was not important. In my opinion, I think part of that experience probably was walking through a narrow, low corridor, coming into this, and then suddenly coming into this great room that was full of light. And I understand at one time, a major part of the room was the view of the mountains to the north, which we no longer have because, now there's a parking structure there. So I think that's a huge part of the experience that has gone away. And I understand the idea of pulling the library into the civic core and trying to make it more accessible to the public as the whole downtown is being revitalized. I think the comment was made that one of the architects said the structure was built from the inside out. And I also think libraries, by nature of what they are, a space to go and to read and to study, really do tend to reflect more inward. So for me, the concept of opening up north-south axes and east-west, or actually I think in this building it's really the north-south axis, and having that great room become really an access for the community to come in and out through doesn't seem appropriate for the limited amount of quiet space or reading space I think was intended originally for that space. The example I can think of, and I worked for years across the street to the north of the downtown Los Angeles Central Library. And I would cut through the library all the time to get to the other side on my way out, during my lunch hour. And that library has a very distinct north-south axis and an east-west axis. But that's a huge library, and those passages don't cut through any reading spaces. In fact, that area has circulation desk and gift shop and administrative offices. So it doesn't impact the intent of the quiet library spaces. So for me, I think the spatial aspect of the architecture and the way it was intended to be used on the interior, especially in the great room, I think is being significantly changed by this proposal. So that's one of my thoughts. Then I think I'll just address, Chair Shire already asked about one of the stair wells in the great room as well, and the elevator. I don't know anything about elevator construction, but it seems to me that element looks like it's maybe because it is clad in wood. To me, it looks like it's really prominent. And if that elevator needs to be there and a part of that large space, could it be glass? Something less obtrusive, just so that it's kind of quiet and it doesn't stand out as much. And then it looks like the grand staircase at the, sorry, may I look at yours? I think this is at the south, going up to the second level. Again, that looks a little bold and large to me, and I know it's a big space. But I guess for me, again, I'm just thinking in context of moving everything into this community living room. I feel like the space is moving away from how it was originally intended to function. I do support moving the administrative offices and opening up light from the south on the second level. Bringing more light and views from the south into the grand space where we've lost them on the north. And then I think I wouldn't mind seeing the east entrance remain as the main entrance, but maybe along the sides of the building. And I know this is brutalist architecture, and I will be the first to admit the modern periods are not my forte, but I don't think it's as brutal as some. But I think it could benefit maybe from being softened a little more. Maybe the landscaping could be a little more, welcoming, and there could be, I understand there's this concern about people walking across the street from the parking structure and, just being able to get right into the library. It seems to me with those stairs, we're taking out, and they look lovely, but I feel like we're adding so much more concrete. And again, what we're doing is we're providing direct access into the grand quiet room. I would almost envision seeing paths, more distinct paths along the north side of that building that are nicely landscaped with, lighting, maybe some water features, some benches, to sort of invite people, maybe a sculpture garden, maybe some sculpture to kind of invite people to walk, people who are pedestrians along the street to walk through and sort of meander to the east and find the entry there. And I did ask about the parking because I've personally always had a little difficulty with that awkward parking tarmac or whatever you want to call it at the east side of the building. And it sounds like part of the parking on the south, or all of it, will go away when the Paseo comes in, connecting the Museum of Neon Art and Downtown or Brand to the library. But maybe that parking area as well, which personally to me, this is just me, it's never really made sense. I've always thought it was just awkward, it's limited, maybe that area could also be landscaped and made more into gardens and sculpture, and so it becomes, you sort of encourage people to come around and they have this experience as they're walking through. I think in the staff report, and with all due respect to the staff, it seems to me that, and I just lost my train of thought. There was talk about the reversibility of the grand stairs on the north and the ability to take off, to remove the entrance at a future date and to put the planters back in, which are their big planters, part of the whole north facade. But to do that, you'd really have to take out all of the stairs, and I think that would be a huge effort. So those are sort of my high-level, I hope not too convoluted views for the moment, but maybe to get the discussion started. Those are my thoughts, and I do appreciate all the work and thought that's gone into this, but that's where I'm coming from right now. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Okay, well, I'll take a stab at it, although I'm not too excited either. But I appreciate your comments, Lorna, because you put a nice frame on the big picture, and I was going to jump right into some specific things. So thank you for your context, and thank you all for your input, the architect, Cindy, Jay, and the comments of the community as well. There's a lot of noise in my head right now about, the process of how this project, and it's already been discussed, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, although it's not dead yet, but I still feel that, this from the get-go was a historic, known to be and felt by the community to be a historic building. I know it's not designated, but that's always been, right up there with, yes, Brand Library is designated. It's older. Maybe it has an important individual associated with it, but this building has been on several conservancy tours, one of them Your Government in Glendale tour, and then again, same tour co-sponsored by the Historical Society, and then a modernism tour. So, it's known throughout the greater LA area as being a significant building. In terms of how it was handled with respect to independent architectural historian consult was, always a little bit iffy, and, I just feel like we need to acknowledge that right from the get-go. I had a couple minor I'll tell you about those later. I don't want to get into the typos right now, but, so the building is significant and has always been thought to be that way. I think that getting into the specifics, I agree that I guess that would be a question that, Lorna's point was very interesting and insightful about the creation of two entrances that create, access and throughway through a quiet space. And I guess the question will have to come back as to what the intention is and how we envision the library functioning as downtown develops and, all of this, the Paseo, the Arts District, everything. And, if we're looking at the library in a different perspective now, I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's a really great question. I think that on the subject of, there's so much here, God. The subject of the infill of the east entrance, I agree that I think right now that entrance doesn't work entirely as an entrance, and it's okay to obliterate it as the main entrance, but I'm not sure really that is not as somehow a damaging solution. There's been talk about a deck, which isn't particularly attractive. I mean, you might as well leave it the way it is if there's going to be a deck. And now there's infill with landscape. And, is that really going to preserve what's there? I know you talked about, I'd like a little more detail also on how the shape of that sunken entranceway is going to be maintained in a landscape context. Let's see. In principle, the idea of two entrances on the north and south side seem okay to me, but the question came up about materials and continuity, and those are really important questions that I don't feel in my mind I have a good enough answer to yet, i.e. the drawings, the stairway looks very grandiose. I'm from Chicago, and I immediately thought of the Art Institute when I saw that stairway. It just looks huge. So, the point about, is that integral with the architecture, or does it look like a grand staircase, plopped down in front of the north face of the building, is still a question in my mind. In principle, I'm not objecting to changing the main entrance. But the main question for me is the continuity, not only form-wise, but material-wise with respect to the two new entrance proposals. And, we talked about having some materials here, and I don't know if there are any, but I don't see them. I think there are some areas where you have lawn in the we didn't talk about landscaping too much, but lawn should certainly be minimized as much as possible. We talked about that east entrance being a repository for people sleeping and maybe security. Well, there's certainly an opportunity to loiter on a large stairway too. So I don't totally understand that relationship either. So spatial relationships of the two new proposed entrances need more information. I think it's good that you have the comments of Marvin Taff, whose name I think first came up on April 8th. So, that was a late comer also to the. He wasn't in the mix of comments before the April 8th community meeting, so he's fairly new, and I understand that there's a change he suggested which sounded descriptively correct, but I wasn't sure I understood it from the pictures, so we'd have to look at that. And then the issue of the jewel box type wood door, repeating itself on the north and the south, also an issue. Boom, boom, boom. Escaping. I think those are my primary comments. So I guess the question of, to Ms. Vartanian's point, what is the library activity on the inside look like in that space? And how is the positioning of two entrances opposite one another going to impact that? And then also, really, what do those stairways look like? And, it's hard to tell from the drawings. It would be nice to hear from your consultant, your historic resources consultant, on all of this. That's it for now.
Are there any other comments? We'll call you up in just a minute. Yeah, I'd like to go through all the comments so that we can ask you questions one time at the end and give you a chance to respond.
Well, my concern is what Greg Grammer brought up about the HRG. Not being, have we seen anything from the HRG as far as how the historic work and how this will impact the library itself?
We haven't seen a response yet. No.
That is something
They've been
that will
recently
come.
engaged, and it will be coming, or they'll take that into consideration. Their comments.
So then, should we today? What are we going to do today then, if without getting that information?
Right, I can see two main options. One, if you're comfortable making your statements pending the HRG response, what we could do is, if HRG finds that the project meets the Secretary's standards and does not preclude eligibility at the local or state level, then I'd relay that to you at the next meeting, but the project could move forward with the Commission's recommendation that to City Council that it's okay because it doesn't do those things. If you wanted to not vote today and take a month and review the HRG statements, that could happen also. I'd like to hear from Cindy Cleary, just in terms of scheduling, if there are any issues with funding or anything else where that might have an impact, which you should know about before you make that decision. That's a possibility.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank Gruen Associates for coming up with a very good comprehensive design. I'm sure many hours went into designing and rehabilitating the Central Library design. I like the general design. I like the functionality. I think it would be great to have an entryway and an exit through the north entrance and have access to the street and to the parking lot. And I think opening up the entry doors on Harvard and Maryland fits the larger master plan by bringing the library into the fabric of the everyday life. So I like that accessibility. And I realize times change and urban settings change and things change. So I see why the library would need to adapt to all these changes. And initially, the north-south the dual entrance was a little bit of a concern to me in terms of logistics, but I guess looking at Pasadena Library also has a north-south entry. And the central area, even though it is an area where there's desks and a place for people to study or read, it's not as quiet an area. It is not that solemn area for people to read. And I do agree with Lorna, and I think that having the entrance there on both sides might take away from that quiet reading area, which that grand room actually does presently offer. Also, reorienting the building is quite a big change from the original design, and I'm not sure what removing the original entrance and creating a new one will do to the character of the building. And I think the entrance, the original entrance, and the conversation pit are character-defining elements in the in this building. So I'd like to see, I don't know if I'd like to see that being covered and with the infill and so on. So if it could be incorporated in some way and kept up. So these changes seem quite permanent to me. And I don't know how that works into the standards. I think things need to be more reversible. So I have not decided one way or another, and I think it would be really nice to have that 1 month to really think about it and to take a look at the Historic Resource Group report before making a final decision.
Okay, thank you. Mike, did you have any comments?
Well, I favor both the north and south entrances. I think historically the way the building that was there prior had a north and a south entrance. But I am concerned with what Commissioner Vartanian had said about coming into the great space. And there is a lot, if you go into the library today on the east entrance, there's just a lot of commotion. And by making this the north entrance, which I like a lot, you'll have a lot of commotion just in an area that's supposed to be incredibly quiet. I mean, it's supposed to be a reading room. I don't know if taking the area upstairs where all the staff is right now and moving it to another area, that will kind of ameliorate some of it. But I am concerned. I am also concerned the fact that the Historic Resources Group, we don't have anything from them. If we make a decision today, we may be making a decision that will impact the library at a later date. So I would like to see the report before I make a decision.
Did you need to make your
Yeah, I'm sorry. My notes are harder to read than I thought. I did just have two more quick comments. One, that I really strongly support the relocation of the admin offices and the opening up of that space, although I know that was an original design feature to have those glazed walls there. I think that's a good solution to the current use of the area. And then secondly, the elevator to me looked as though, although in principle I'm not objecting to the elevator shaft being where it is, and I feel that probably solid wood, if it were to be there, is less distracting than having it be open and seeing the mechanism going up and down. It feels like, this building has tremendous horizontal, perpendicular, and parallel aspects to its design. And there are very dramatic angles, if I read your renderings right, to that elevator, in which various parts of it are converging rather than either perpendicular or parallel to the earth. So it just seemed a little bit distracting and discordant, which is just a design aspect to the thing. So in principle, looks good, but there was something very startling about the fact that there are converging angles there.
I'd like to say a few comments, and then we'll bring you back up here. Overall, I think this is a very challenging project to have such a modern building designed and built when it was, with completely different library operations at the time. A lot has changed. And from my experience with the Los Angeles Community College District for building multiple libraries, I've had a chance to see many of those and really see how they function. So I can actually really appreciate the change in entries to the north and south. I think it does make more sense now that the parking is from the north. It's always been a little challenging to figure out on that building where the entry is, depending on what side you end up parking and how to get there. So I think that's an improvement. I'm not necessarily sold on the material. Is wood the right approach to the entry? I'd like to see some consistency between the two when that's developed. I don't feel like I got a very detailed, enlarged view of that entry in any of the presentation, and I'd like to see that, just so I can kind of understand what is that detail, how is it connecting to the building, what does that portal look like. Regarding the comments about the main great room space for studying, I think that it's balanced with the addition of the study areas and carrels and tables and chairs on the upper floors within the book stacks, as well as in the area where the admin offices used to be. And I think we have to consider the audience in a library with multiple generations. And there are generations that like noise and activity, and that actually creates a better environment for studying and for research and for reading. And there are some of us that like quiet, peaceful. We may pick in between the book stacks for no disruption. So I feel like the approach has been balanced, although it will create, potentially more of a busy space. That might not be a bad thing for everyone. I feel like it's balanced with some other alternative spaces for others. I'd love to see the new designs more closely, because I think you probably took care of some of my concerns with the initial design of the ramps and stairs and elevator. It seemed to be kind of overpowering for the space. So what I could see just real briefly on the screen, it looked like that had been streamlined and minimized, and I think it might have addressed my concerns, but I can't say that for sure just because I don't have those in front of me to look at. I appreciate your improvements on accessibility. I think from the exterior coming in and within, I know those are code requirements that we have to take care of today, but I think it's definitely much improved. I would definitely like to hear from and or see the HRG's input or report or comments. My thoughts would have been that those would have they would have been on board and provided that input and all of that, and I can understand some of the concerns if it had been represented that way and that not happened. So I think that's pretty important for us to make sure that we get their opinions and their input, and that there's some willingness to make adjustments as necessary to meet those concerns, if they have any. So I think we need to hear twofold. I think we need to hear from Cindy regarding library and schedule. I'd like to bring Deborah back up as well, just to discuss some of the comments brought forward by the Glendale Historic Society, and to maybe address some of that you've heard. And then I think we need to decide if we can take another month to see refined drawings, comments from HRG, and if we've got the time to do so, or if we can bless it with some considerations or conditions today.
Yeah.
So with that, I'd like to bring back open the public hearing and bring back Cindy Clary. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I first of all would like to thank you for your comments. They're very well thought out, and we will go back and consider each and every one of them. I'd also like to express, and I think I speak on behalf of Gruen as well, that we agree with the Glendale Historical Society's view that we do need an independent analysis, and we're all looking forward to that from HRG. So in terms of the schedule, we have rather an expedited schedule due to some funding that we're applying for. So our goal is to get to City Council with your recommendations, as well as the Parks Commission and the Arts and Culture Commission's thoughts on the project by June 11th. So coming back in May with an HRG report and some I guess renderings or drawings that answer some of your questions is within our timeline. I do want to address the comments about the great room or the living room or whatever it is we want to call it, as far as it being a quiet space. Perhaps the intent originally was for it to be a quiet space, but because of the design, it's never been a quiet space. You just can't have a quiet space with that kind of tall ceilings. So that's been an interesting situation for the library, where we have people coming in who want the traditional library space and quiet and peaceful and reflective spaces. And also, as you said, Chair Shire, we also have people that come in and expect kind of an active community gathering space with programming and more hustle and bustle. So that's what that main room, that great room, has really become. It's become a place where we can do programming and where we can have, well, our reference department just all by itself is not quiet, so it's impossible for that space to become a quiet space. So I don't think that having the north and south entrance really interferes with that. What we did do, and I think you all recognize it, is we tried to add quiet spaces throughout the library to meet that traditional expectation of what a library is. And we've done it through conference rooms, the addition of conference rooms, through more study kiosks, through the reading, we're calling it a reading spa on the upper level, thinking that will be a more quiet space. My intention, libraries are changing, so one thing that we're thinking about doing with that great room, what I'd like to do, right now we're open Monday through Thursdays until 8 o'clock, and we'll continue to be open until 8 to provide traditional library services, but I would really like to see our hours extended so we can do programming in that space. We're in an active downtown area. I'd like to have movie night, or, sort of like what the Americana does, where they have free programming, invites families to come in, but do it in an indoor space. So my vision for the library and the use of that space is just that. So once again, it'll never be a quiet space. We also are going to council in the next, as we go through the budget process, and ask that they approve us using that space on a rental basis. So when we're closed, we might use it. And once again, recognizing it's a very active kind of space, using it for the community to utilize it for whatever functions they see fit. So if you have any other questions about that, I'm here, or any other questions.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks.
Deborah Gerard.
Thank you. And as Cindy said, this is part of how we do our work. We do want to hear your comments. We do want to go back and consider them, and we will do that with every single comment, as we have actually been doing from the community meeting as well. So I won't go over the quiet area. Cindy very appropriately talked about that. I'll just touch on a few of the comments that were made. Glass elevator, we certainly talked about having a glass elevator. The unfortunate reality with a glass elevator is you see all the stuff. And and the stuff that you see is very techy, and in some places it's perfectly appropriate. It didn't feel quite appropriate here. It felt like too much visual noise. And maybe too much distraction. And when we were able to just kind of slip it slipped the elevator and its enclosure into one of those coffers. It felt like that was feeling like the right solution. But the angularity and all that, we'll go back and take a look at to make sure that we calm that stuff down to the extent that it needs to be calmed down. I won't go through every comment. I'm also from Chicago. Maybe that great library mentality is there. The staircase, one of the reasons that it's physically takes up, this is now the exterior staircase, one of the reasons it physically takes up a lot of space is to make it very easy to walk up. We can make it more compact, take up less space, but be less comfortable. And so that's always a balance that we have in these public buildings is you give a lot of space to hardscape, but you make it very easy for people to navigate. And so that was just a balance. When we come back, we'll do a better job of showing you all the ways that we're softening it and greening it. And probably the view that we chose accentuates the hardscape, and maybe there's some other views that we can show you that will show all of the landscape that we are putting in there, none of which is sod or lawn. We are not ripping out all of the original sod and lawn, but where we have an intervention and need to disturb it, we are putting back drought-tolerant, local, appropriate planting that will be low maintenance. Things that are appropriate to the brutalist architecture, big masses of single types of plants. And we'll do a better job of showing that to you as well. One thing I found interesting, I kind of forgot to mention, it wasn't really appropriate, but Marv told me there was originally a fireplace about where the elevator goes. Just not suggesting we bring back a fireplace, just making that comment.
In the books?
I'm sorry? Yeah, well, that was, there was a great interesting discussion about that. All right, so, and then the rest of your comments, we will take them and certainly consider them. I do have to come back to the comments made by the Historical Society, and I guess I'm trying to not take this personally, but I do just have to say that I can consider myself to be a person of great veracity, and I think that everyone who knows me, including Historic Resources Group, including my clients, will tell you that veracity is absolutely my veracity is quite high, and so to be accused of having a lack of veracity and a lack of transparency, somewhat disturbing. I don't believe that we said that HRG was there from the beginning of the process. What is true is from the beginning of the process, we consulted with HRG, but that was in 2010. That's how long a process this has been. And back when we were interviewing for the job, we did include them in our team when we thought this was more preservation-based. And then we got selected, and a year went by without the project being able to go forward because redevelopment went away, and so there was no funding for the job. And when there was a sliver of hope that we could get this project funded, a city engineer approached me and said, "Hey, we got a sliver of hope to do this. We got to do it really fast." And so that's where our process fell apart a little bit. And again, not for a lack of integrity or anything else, but it was actually an intent to honor our clients' need to get this project done really fast. And so there it is. And I guess I would welcome an opportunity to sit down and actually talk directly, because that's how I like to do things. As I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. And in the next month, I hope that we will be able to have some nice conversations here and clear the air. But I hope you'll see that it was a process problem as opposed to a product or a design problem, and that we can move past that all. So we will certainly have Historic Resources Group. We didn't bring them today because it just seemed I didn't want to put them in the middle of something when I wanted to give them an opportunity to give us their studied opinion and not be on the hot seat. But I actually have no doubt that they will be supportive of the overall project and that we will find a way to incorporate their comments, which we would do whether you postpone this by a month or not. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we'll close the public session. So hearing from Cindy Clary about the timetable, and Do the other commissioners agree that we'd like to see this back in May?
Yes.
Updated drawings, the HRG's input and report?
Okay. Well, also, I have a short list of other things that the commission specifically asked to see.
Okay.
And if I missed anything, please let me know, and we'll make sure everyone tries to get that here. In general, I think you wanted more information about the material palette that's being proposed, as well as the proposed landscaping. Of course, a report from HRG, more detail about many aspects of the project in terms of drawings and possibly renderings of the entry north and south, inside and outside, perhaps, at least for the north entry, and then also for the elevator and then the new stairway. Better views. Yeah, and that's everything that I jotted down. Is there anything I missed?
I think that's everything.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. This is a good time to announce that because next month's regularly scheduled hearing would fall on Memorial Day, we're going to move back 2 days. So we're going to have a hearing on May 29th, which is the Wednesday of that week. And we're also able to have a 5 o'clock time slot. So we can move this to an evening meeting, which is one of our goals that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. So this is without giving anything away, a view of things to come, probably. So.
Thank you. So that's Wednesday, May 29th at 5 p.m.
5 p.m.
All right, then with that, we'll move to the next agenda item. 7B, 1050 Hillcroft Road. This is a Glendale Register nomination and a Mills Act application.
Okay, and for the commissioners, you've all met Eileen Babahani, who's been working with us for quite a while now as an intern. This is her official debut at the dais with the staff report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
And I'm going to present Glendale Register of Historic Resources nomination and Mills Act application for 1050 Hillcroft Road today.
One quick
Okay, hold on one moment.
Leave Deborah. Well, there's one on the left. This is hers.
Back.
Okay, go ahead and continue.
The property is located in the Ross Point Historic District as a contributor to the Historic District. And this house is an excellent example of the Spanish colonial revival style. It stands on the lot which slopes moderately from north to the south. And the house designer, who is unknown, could nicely create a two-story volume at the top of the slope and another at the bottom, which are connected with the round tower at the middle of these two volumes. And in some level, this square tower became the most distinctive feature of the primary facade. Looking at the building record, Seymour Thompson built the house in 1928 for his family, and some records show that he was an architect and also engineer. According to construction permit, he is a contractor of 1050 Hillcroft, and he may also have designed the house. Mr. Thompson sold the house in 1932 to Harry Lee Howe, who was the principal of Glendale's Theodore Roosevelt Junior High School. And after his death in 1938, his family continued to occupy the building until 1964. And the house retains many character-defining features of its style, including asymmetrical facade, gable roofs clad with red clay tile, smooth texture stucco walls, wrought iron detailing, and decorative terracotta vents. Several elements at the front facade add special interest to the house, which include, as I mentioned, a unique squat single-story entry tower with shallow pitch conical roof and a deeply recessed entry. And also there is a loggia, features a pair of horseshoe arches influenced by Moorish architecture at that site. We have corbelled arches supported the second floor projection, and also very special flattened arch over the garage door. And both the wood door at the primary entry and garage door have decorative paneling which appear to be original. And the other notable feature at the primary facade are curving stairs in front of the primary entryway. Those are some other shots from the doors. And for the windows of the house, we have multi-light wood casement windows and a large multi-light recessed picture window above the garage. And many windows feature fabric awnings supported by decorative iron spears. And here for the rear facade, we can see that the level of design and quality found at the front facade continues at the rear facade. We have various multi-light wood casement windows and a large arched picture window. And also we have pairs of recessed porches and staircases provide accesses from upper floors to backyard. Several changes and alterations have been made in exteriors over the years. In recent years, the alteration include front entry stairway with decorative tiles in the place of wood steps that those themselves were not original. And the other changes is adding the decorative painting at the edge of entry arch right here, and also adding flagstone paving at the front walk and driveway. There is also a replacement of window at the side wall here of the front loggia with a new louvered window. In overall, for alteration at the primary facade, staff found that a few alterations are appropriate to the style of the house, except for this window that I mentioned here. And for the rear facade, alteration include adding an uncovered stairways and balcony. This shot we can see the stairways and balcony here, built in 2003. The stairs set directly in front of the graceful arcade at the lower porch. And this is the major alteration at the rear facade, and staff found that this addition is acceptable since it's invisible from the street and also is reversible, means that by removing it sometimes in future the integrity of the architecture will still remain. There are also window replacement at the rear facade for bathroom and kitchen at second floor. And the window shot, maybe we can see that one. This window for the kitchen. And this window, the new wood casement windows reflect the design and appearance of the original windows of the house. And most of the windows are original, just these two at the rear and the one at the loggia that I mentioned before. In landscaping at the rear of the house features trees and plants with several rubble stone walls, and swimming pool and deck were added in 1966. And for criteria, staff determined that the property appears to meet criterion 3 of the eligibility criteria for listing on Glendale Register of Historic Resources based on many aspects of the Spanish colonial revival style and its architecture, such as its placement and design on its site, overall massing and configuration, high quality of materials, craftsmanship and detailing, and also for its notable feature and Moorish architecture influence. For staff recommends one condition for approval, which is removal of a lowered window at front loggia and replace it with a new wood casement or hung window to match original windows. And the house was featured on the Glendale Historical Society Fall 2012 Home Tour, Glendale Golden Age. And once again, I want to mention here that the house is a contributor in Rossmoy Historic District. And at the end, for the name of the house, staff recommends that 1050 Hillcroft Road be named the Thompson House after its first owner, Seymour Thompson, and probably the designer of the house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have one speaker, Paul Lombardi.
Hello. I've met everyone, of course, and thank you for your consideration. This house has been a lot of fun. Bought it in 2002 and effectively have touched all the surfaces and had a lot of fun doing it. And all you guys came by and checked it out and saw what we did and how we did it. And I think it'll be a valuable addition to the historical preservation commitment that the city has. I think it's really important that people understand that they can take an old dog like that and turn it into something that is very usable, very up-to-date, chic, whatever you want to call it, and still not destroy the quality. I think that's the goal, and that was certainly my intent, and I hope I did it well enough for you folks to put it on the register. Questions?
Thank you.
Nothing?
Not yet, I don't believe. Any questions? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll close the public session and open it up for commissioner comments.
Okay.
You want to go?
I'll go.
All right.
Thank you very much for nominating, for bringing your house forward for nomination. We're very blessed in Glendale to have probably numbering in thousands of Spanish colonial revival homes that remain intact and have lovely features. And unfortunately, not all of these houses rise in distinction architecturally to qualify them to be called out as landmarks. However, this house has some unique characteristics that set it apart, and combined with its traditional defining features, certainly do qualify it to be a historic landmark. In my opinion, the thing that sails above everything else, there are some very specific distinctive features, but the thing that struck me about this house was the extraordinary balance in the front elevation. It really kind of sings out to the street, almost like a well-composed painting. And there's almost a musicality to it, the way you have that sweeping S-curve of the lawn and the various segments of the facade that not only meld into each other so well, but so subtly integrate with the grade of the street slope, which is, not very dramatic, but it's just a beautiful blend, which is nice. That and then feature-wise, the incredibly deep recessing of the door accentuates that beautiful musical facade in a great way, and as Mr. Platt pointed out in his report, it almost has, I didn't think of that word, but it almost has like a hinge aspect to it. The flared staircase, I think there was mention that may not have been the configuration.
Yeah, we just don't know.
We don't know, but I don't think it really matters because that type of flared staircase is quite common in this type of architecture, and it looks beautiful. And also the tile with the decorative risers is also a very common decorative feature of staircases in Spanish Revival houses of the 20s, so that's fine. And then the more keyhole or horseshoe-style loggia is quite nice. I agree with staff. I'm in agreement about what needs to be changed. I only think of that window. I'm not aware of any other things that struck me as needing immediate attendance. So I'll defer to my colleagues on that. The corbelled arches at the bottom of that second-story projection are also quite stunning. The rear addition, I think the stairway and supportive structure there integrates very nicely into the house, and although Secretary Standards number 9 does talk about differentiation of new additions so that you can tell what's historic and what isn't, I think in this case, sometimes you have to go on a case-by-case basis, and in this case, it's actually quite nicely integrated and it works fine, and it should be. So it just all seems right to me. Comment on the garage. Usually a garage looks like a garage, and you go, oh God, it's a garage. But that is really a aesthetically pleasing garage, and kudos to the designer to do that. From the most south-facing doorway on that garage all the way up as you meander through the elevation to the northernmost second-story window. You've just got this really beautiful flow. So other than the window, which will come up, I think, on the Mills Act portion of the thing, I'm all for it, and I think it's just an extraordinarily lovely house, elevation-wise in particular, front elevation-wise. I'm done.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Lombardi, thank you very much for bringing your home forth for consideration. 1050 Hillcroft is a beautiful example of a Spanish revival home, very well maintained, and I think all the changes that you did were very much in keeping with the historic character of the home. And I think one of the main things about the house is the challenge of the topography and how it was built with the multi-level. So I think that was very nicely addressed with the original architect. The house has many historic character defining elements, and some of the ones that I love is I just love the rounded shape which you see throughout the house, all the way from the entrance of the door to the entry, the barrel-shaped entryway, which kind of flares out somewhat. The rounded loggia, the arched windows in the back. I just think the whole design of the house comes together very nicely. So I definitely love the house. One of the things that kind of bothered me a little bit was the stairway in the back, even though I understand the logistics of it, and I appreciate that the columns holding the stairs line up with the columns in the arch loggia in the back, and I do appreciate that it is reversible. And I think just knowing that it is reversible and won't damage the character of the house, I think is fine with me. That was one of my only concerns. So I would definitely support it. Thank you.
Anyone else like to comment? Lorna?
Well, I agree with all the comments that have been made by my fellow commissioners. This truly is probably one of the better known homes in the neighborhood because of the facade. I think because of the very specific keyhole arches. Again, there is a very particular balance and harmony. The property really does use exemplary elements of the Spanish colonial revival style. And you may or may not know, we actually use a photo of the front of your house on the opening page of our Homeowners Association website. So I would agree that
You don't even need to bother with this designation thing.
That's right.
But all of that said, I do want to, as Commissioner Tufenkian mentioned, and I do want to pose this question, because I think when we're looking at potential individual designations for Mills Act properties, typically, we are asked to look at all sides of a property, not just that side which is visible from the street. And although the staircase and the landing in the back appears to be reversible, and I'm sorry, I don't know that we have a photo of the back of the house without, like, prior to 2003. Do we know what it looked like?
I think you can picture it, just the porch in the middle, at that middle floor, which is kind of the second floor.
I'm just not sure under the
Has
porch.
3 arches that are
Yes.
somewhat hidden by this, but they're still there, and when you're inside the porch, you see them, certainly. Oh, okay, the bottom left picture is inside the porch, so you still get the sense of the arcade feel.
Right.
When you're using it. It's somewhat diminished from the outside, obviously. There's a house, I don't know if you noticed when you were on your site visit, if you're standing in the backyard looking away from the house and you look up the hill, there's a really fantastic Tudor house that was designated 3 years ago, probably. It was the one that had the canopy over the driveway, if you remember that house. That has a very, very elaborate multi-story spiral staircase, big concrete columns supporting a deck. And the problem with these houses on the steep hillsides is it's hard to get out to the backyard. When that house came forward, the commission recognized, this is kind of a dramatic intervention, but weighing it, they thought it was acceptable. You're not bound by that decision, but you can see them from one to the other. So.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that, because I couldn't quite think of an example, but I do know that Tudor house very well, and I am familiar, now that you bring it up, with the spiral staircase in the back. But again, I guess I'm just, I wasn't sitting on the commission when that house came forward, so something to consider. And there is that landing, which is sort of like a deck, and then I think below it there's lattice work that just sort of encloses the bottom part, and I don't know if it was maybe just wall there before, just going down, just flat wall. We don't have a real good picture of it. I guess maybe the top left. If I remember correctly, I think do those stairs come down to a deck where there's furniture?
Yeah.
It was just a straight sheer wall.
Just a straight sheer wall, no elements, nothing.
No, we would consider.
Excuse me,
Paul,
excuse
Yeah,
me a
sorry.
second. You'll need to come forward, and we'll have to open the public session if you'd like to comment. So come forward.
And I apologize, I directed a question towards Mr. Lombardi.
No, what I was saying is that the back of the house was slick. It was just straight down. There was no staircase and no outdoor landing there, patio, whatever you want to call it. That's the way it was. And the access to the backyard, by our standards today, none of it's okay. There's no head clearance. The stairs are too steep and all that kind of stuff. So, it's not perfect, but that's as perfect as I could make it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate that.
We'll
Sorry.
close the public hearing.
Okay.
Continue.
No. And I was going to say, I do appreciate that access to the backyard did seem limited for such a steep such a steep property. So I think I'd like to hear Commissioner Morgan's comments, and those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Lombardi for his fascinating tour yesterday of 1050 Hillcroft. He's an excellent steward of a remarkable house. 1050 Hillcroft is an exemplary example of Spanish colonial revival built in 1928 during the fourth phase of the Ross Moines development. As Glendale has a wonderful stock of Spanish colonial revivals, this one tends to stand out. Its unique features as its imposing entry tower and Moorish arches set this house apart from other houses in the area. As stated in the staff presentation, the house sits on a slope that allows the house to step down in both directions to follow the terrain. You can partially see this slope in the pictures that the Glendale Public Library has online under Ross Moines the Superb, and I urge you to look at Ross Moines under development. The exterior changes to the house over the years seem to be in keeping with its architectural integrity, especially the tiled front steps, which in a survey of other homes in the immediate area seem to be era-specific. I do agree with the staff the louvered windows in the front should be replaced with a more era-appropriate window. Seeing Mr. Lombardi's work and restoration both inside and outside the house, I feel that with staff's direction it will be accomplished. The new back stairway in front of the arcade of the lower porch, though new, provides a more direct way to enter the backyard, and you could see the design elements that were undertaken to not block the sightline of those downstairs arcade back arches. Personally, it was a thrill to see all the original door hardware and the uncovered frescoes and now what is the game room. I agree with the staff's findings and feel that 1050 Hillcroft meets Criterion 3 and the property be designated as a historic resource. Saying that, I'd like to ask one more thing, if the Commission would entertain this thought. I also feel the house qualifies under Criterion 2. The staff finding that Mr. Harry Lee Howe did not play a significant role in the history and development of Glendale flies in historical fact. Mr. Howe, who was born in Michigan and arrived in Glendale in 1907, 1 year after Glendale's incorporation. He was originally hired as a history teacher at the 1904 Broadway and Brand High School. Mr. Howe was then made vice principal of the Glendale Union High School and oversaw the move to the new 1908 Harvard High School, where the library now is. One must remember that in all Glendale, Burbank, and Eagle Rock, there was but one high school, and the Harvard campus was it. One has only to look at Glendale's phenomenal growth from 2,000 in 1906 to 20,000 in 1920 to see all the expansion of Glendale's student population. If ever one person held the key to Glendale's growth, Mr. Howe was it. I would like to read a small excerpt from a 1921 of Mr. Howe's problems, and this is the Glendale Daily Press from May 1921. At the present rate of increase in Glendale's population, Mr. White, who was giving the speech, demonstrated that in less than 4 years we shall have doubled our population. This is the student population. And that in 1 year's time, at the present rate of increase, every school will be crowded out into the street. This is something that Mr. Howe had to deal with every day. Because of Mr. Howe's work helping and guiding the high school, when Roosevelt Junior High was organized in 1932, Mr. Howe was appointed principal, a position he held till his death and whose funeral was held at 1050 Hillcroft. I asked the Commission to consider changing the staff's recommendation of naming designated properties for just the first owner. If the property is so designated and approved a historical resource, I ask the Commission to honor such a hard-working and selfless individual of Glendale's educational growth and beginnings through naming it the Thompson Howe House. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll offer some of my comments. First of all, thank you for your time yesterday. You have a beautiful home. From the street view, the way it just kind of wraps that corner with the elevation change is beautiful, and the details and asymmetrical balance are really phenomenal. So if I had to comment only on the front of the house, you'd have my full approval. I have some challenges, however, with the back of the house. It's so unfortunate, but the balance and harmony of the home and of the Spanish details, to me, are completely disrupted by that addition of the stair. And so I did a lot of just kind of studying and research, and I wanted just to, for the other commissioners, read part of the Secretary of Standards just for us to weigh, because I feel it completely obscures and obstructs the three-arched colonnade, the back facade. It throws off the balance. As I was thinking about other Spanish-style homes in our area that are on the register, or not even on the register, I don't know of one single one that there is access to ground level from a second-story balcony. And so just that concept alone throws it off for me. I understand functionality reasons and convenience, but I found a part in the standards, which I think we need to look at, that talks about this should only be done as a secondary option if other first alternatives aren't available. So let me read this section for consideration. It says some exterior and interior alterations to historic buildings are generally needed to assure its continued use, but it is most important that such alterations do not radically change, obscure, or destroy character-defining spaces, features, materials, or finishes. The construction of an exterior addition to a historic building may seem to be essential for a new use, but it is emphasized in the rehabilitation guidelines that such new additions should be avoided, if possible, and considered only after it is determined that those needs cannot be met by altering secondary, i.e., non-character defining interior spaces. If after a thorough evaluation of interior solutions, an exterior addition is still judged to be the only viable alternative, then it should be designed and constructed to be clearly differentiated from the house, and so that the character-defining features are not radically changed, obscured, damaged, or destroyed. So I weigh that, and then I weigh number 9, where it talks about new additions, that it shouldn't destroy historic materials, features, spatial relationships, size, scale, proportion, massing. And then I look at the back elevation, and I can't see past the stair. I can't see past the addition from the balcony, this stair crossing over this beautiful arcade and facade of the back of the house. And I ask myself, if a historic home came today, would I approve this? And unfortunately, I could not. So I think back, what would have been the first alternative? And I understand the homeowner's desire and need to have more accessible space to the backyard. However, I believe that could have done with probably reworking the interior stair that is, has a low overhead clearance, because off of this 3 arched kind of terrace, there is access to the backyard from around that right side of the house in the photo. And in my opinion, there's no need to really ever, from a second-story balcony, access ground level. So that's really where I have a difficult time. If I was to approve this, I would have to say that that stairwell should be removed from the house, as I think it obstructs the facade and the materials. You know, typically on a Spanish-style home wouldn't have a wood-framed stair. You know, it would be done in stucco. It would be done meshing in with the home. It would be done to celebrate and not take away and obscure from the beautiful details. And I feel like this is a stairwell on stilts attached to this beautiful Spanish colonial house. And I could say I hate that it's there, because the front, if you look to the curbside, the front of the house and the other features are just phenomenal. But for me personally, then I look at the picture, I'm like, why can't I see past it? And part of it is because I literally can't see the house. I can't see the arches. I can't see that beautiful colonnade. And so I'd like to just kind of hear back from maybe staff and also from other commissioners. For instance, in the past, when we've required homes to take away additions carports in order to be on the register or to have the Mills Act, we've requested they change garage doors in order to. Why is this different? Like, I need some help understanding that.
And you're right, it isn't exactly different. There's kind of always a balancing act that we go through when we're trying to see if we think it meets the criteria. There is favor is given to front public facades to some degree. Just, I think that's a natural way, even though obviously under the Mills Act we look at every facade, every part of the property. I hinged our opinion as we crafted the staff report on the reversibility aspect. This obviously is a feature of concern to anyone looking at it. The idea You could make the argument that it's clearly differentiated from the original structure, but I don't think that's not it's not done in the way that's the goal of the Secretary Standards.
Yeah.
I think it's something that the Commission has to think about and come to a consensus whether this is an issue for enough commissioners to either deny the application or to ask the owner if he can remove this as a Mills Act condition. If he chooses not to, because of its functionality for the use of the house, it really comes down to your vote in terms of whether commissioners can live with this or not, recognizing that it's not the most appropriate feature, and we certainly wouldn't approve it if we were going through design review on a Glendale Register property if it came to us now.
I also wanted to go back to the house on I think it's Hillcroft above.
Yeah, it's a safe street.
I believe that's, in my opinion, a very different condition. That is truly a hillside lot. Although this is sloping and has some elevation change, I wouldn't necessarily call it a hillside lot because the house goes directly to a flat, level yard, as most houses do. The other one is clearly on a hillside with, overhanging
Lots of narrow
balconies at every level because there's no really flat yard. So just for the other commissioners that do or don't know that house, think of that, I think. I guess, like I say, it's a very, very tough decision for me because curbside, the house is there. You have it. But I also have to be very consistent in my approach and evaluation of homes and properties. And based on my past decisions on other properties, I cannot grant the approval with it how it is. Like I say, I think other options could have been done. It wouldn't have even bothered me so much as, say, to the lower terrace, had that been done in stucco with some stairs, right off that first story, that could have been done, I think, appropriately. It's just trying to attach a second story balcony to a ground floor, ground level, I guess I should say, is a strange approach for me. Are there other thoughts or comments or discussion?
I guess I would say that I probably concur, and I'm also struggling. But I think, as Jay mentioned, if this came before us on a designated property, we probably would not approve it. So,
and I want to say all that again for the owners as well. This takes nothing away from your home. It is worthy of home tours as it was. It's a beautiful property and residence. It's just really challenging when we really have to kind of follow the guidelines. So that's where my opinions and position on this have to stand. But again, I want to say that we don't take this lightly. We have to do the right thing for preservation, and sometimes convenient decisions or logistic decisions are different than preservation and trying to restore and bring it back to what it was in its glory. So,
if I may, I guess the other thing we should probably just say and remember is that the house is already protected under the historic district to a certain degree, and I think when we do our individual designations, we're just taking it to another level of what we sort of require for preservation.
Can I say something?
Do my commissioners have a need to open the public hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll reopen the public hearing, and you may come forward and.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to say, the point you made was that if this came in front of the Historic Committee now, it wouldn't be okayed. I had to go before the Historic Committee when I did my addition. And
that would have been the Design Review Board.
Yes. Is that not the same?
It's not, no.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah.
That was
No,
it.
thank you
But
for
it was reviewed.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I have a question. Would the owners maybe possibly contemplate
Caroline,
doing something?
Is this a question to the owner?
To the owner.
Then I'll have to bring him back up. So
Okay.
could you hang on a second? Mr. Lombardi, would you please come forward again, and we'll reopen the public hearing? Maybe just stay there until I'm assured my fellow
Okay,
commissioners don't
fair
have any other
enough.
questions. Caroline?
Well, I just wanted to put it up front and see if you might be open to changing or doing something different that might be more in keeping with the standards.
Well, here's what I did and why I did it. I took each and every one of you down all the staircases and showed you the egress to the backyard, and there was a reason for that. There was no, structurally you can't do what you said you wanted to do to switch that staircase. It's a biggie, you can't do it. And it didn't work, because I did look at that as my first option. And you can't get it wide enough, you can't do this, you can't do that. So it's just a question of functionality, but couched in that is how do you be true to the style and this, that, and the other thing. And that's the way I approached it. And there is no other way I know of how to do it, and I've done a bunch of building, and that's about what you get. And so that's why I did what I did.
Are there any other questions for the homeowner? Thank you very much.
Well, you hit the nail on the head for the problem with the house.
Is there further discussion? A motion?
I'll just make a comment, because when I was reviewing the house on site, I didn't react to it that way. I was focused very much on, the differentiation issue, which is, I think, number 9, not what was done, and I was thinking very much of the house as it exists. In the context of, would such a change, if it were to come before us, be approved now for that house or a similar house? I have to agree that it wouldn't, most likely. But then I step back, and the whole issue of the disconnect we have, there are many properties that are not either not contributing structures, and they're not designated landmarks, and they're intact, significant in the sense of continuity of the neighborhood, period homes, and the principles of design review obviously are really disparate between different boards. So that's a whole other issue that has nothing to do with what we're doing here today, but it's still on my mind now, really big time, and creates all kinds of other issues. So I'm very reticent to go down the road of putting this in the Mills Act. I mean, that's my opinion, but I have to acknowledge that in the context of consistency of review standards for this board, I see it as problematic, but that's not how I looked at it when I was there. I looked at it as a feature of the house, probably because it's so well integrated design-wise and material-wise. I didn't think about it as an inappropriate add-on. So my perceptions lean me to allow it. That's just my opinion. On the other topic of Hal Thompson, I don't agree that this person rises to the level of criteria number 2, but I think as a nod of respect to the history of that individual's involvement in things, that it would be okay, and I think it's within the context of our policy that there could be a hyphenated name.
Sure. We actually, in one of our districts, we have another Thompson House, the Dryden Thompson House, which isn't officially named because it's not individually designated, but sure, it's common around the country.
I would support a hyphenated name.
Just for the sake of clarification for the fellow commissioners, I wanted just to make sure we read this sentence in its entirety so that for this decision and for future, we understand what they differentiated and how that applies. So it says the new work shall be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with historic materials, features, size, scale, proportion, massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. So it isn't an either or. It's not to be so dramatically different that we can tell. It's subtle differences yet completely congruent with the initial original design in all those areas. So just so we can kind of know it isn't a pick and choose, it's both. So with that said, are there further discussion? Is there a motion?
And I think the commission could consider options to offer the applicant and perhaps even ask those here before you make your final vote in terms of is he willing to remove the stairway? Is he willing to consider a redesign that could be brought back to the commission and you could table your decision until you saw perhaps a spiral stairway on the side of the house with a small landing might work better? Or alternatively, a third choice might be taking the stairway from the upper floor to that deck out, but possibly leaving that deck so there is a more clear path of access to the rear yard. And those French doors that you see at the bottom of the left top image, or go to the full back, the full slide, different slide. No. Well, those French doors were in place historically, and they had iron balconets in front of them, so they were doorways in a way. So it kind of makes more sense to have that lower balcony possibly stay, which would force, you'd use the interior stair to go from the upper floor to the middle floor, and then you could exit out through those doors.
We can ask the owner again. I believe when we just asked, that was Caroline's question, the answer was no.
Was it?
Because of functionality and the only way it would work for him. But
I didn't quite hear that. So
was I?
If he said no already, then and isn't disagreeing right now.
Open it? That's out. Okay. Okay. Could we open the public session again? And Mr. Lombardi, would you mind coming forward? The question on the floor for you is, are you willing to, in order to have this historic designation, if we made it a condition to remove either the stairwell from the third or kind of that second balcony to the first, to redesign it and come back to us for consideration, or are you love the functionality, love the design, love how it is, and that would be your...
Yeah, I answered it, and
Okay.
I would not do that because it doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
There's the answer.
That's the answer.
So is there a motion?
Or put it on the table. I'll put it on the table and we can vote for it. I recommend that the property at 1050 Hillcroft Road be designated as a historic resource in the Glendale Register of Historic Resources based on the findings identified in the staff determination. And we'll do that first, and then we'll go to the Mills Act, or?
No, and if you want to do the whole thing.
You should link them. Yeah.
And staff also suggests that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend that the City Council authorize the city manager to enter into a Mills Act contract with the property owners for property tax savings.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor?
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian?
Do we need to have more discussion?
Yeah, we can.
I can't.
Yeah, we should just...
I think
The mic is off. Would you mind?
Oh, good.
Hold 1 second. If there's still discussion needed,
Yeah, we can go back.
We should stop and discuss.
Right.
Okay, so I'm not going to qualify my statement. I'm going to vote no.
And Commissioner Tufangian?
Yes.
Madam Chair Shire?
No.
Okay. Motion to approve for recommendation with 3-2 vote.
You are approved for the Glendale Register.
Okay. Thank you very much. We move to agenda item 8A, and this is an update on possible change to HPC's schedule to allow for evening meetings. We have one speaker from the floor, Reg Mardian. We're ready for you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. It's good to see you again. I'm very excited then to hear that we're moving into that direction, because I think will help the Commission and the public put their few cents in and not take time off from work to come here. I'm excited to see it, and I appreciate that you're having the next meeting being in the evening, but it's sad to say that I won't be here. I'm out of the country for a few weeks, but again, thank you very much for considering it and bringing it back so quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, do you have something to report?
Yeah, we haven't made any final decision, but because of changes that are before City Council right now in terms of the schedule for Design Review Board and some other shifts in calendars, it appears that there are at least a couple of evening slots that are open now that weren't open before, that we can be guaranteed to have, but we haven't finalized that. So, it looks good. We're kind of waiting for everything to shake out with what's going to happen exactly with Design Review Board, which used to take up every Thursday, and now it probably will only be doing 2 a month.
Okay.
So we'll keep you posted next month, and we'll just have to wait for the process to move forward. What we're looking at is a 5 o'clock meeting. We'd be comparable to the Design Review Boards and other evening meeting times that start at 5.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be on next month's.
Yeah, I'll re-agendize it, just whether we have something to say or not.
Okay.
But hopefully soon we'll really know.
Thank you. Okay, 8B, discussion regarding future citywide historic resource survey.
This is the Commission's time to kind of tell staff, what the Commission would like to do. You're already on record saying that you want a citywide survey. I think everyone in the city organization recognizes the value of a citywide survey. As always, the question has been money. And I'm not sure, if you want to make an official statement that we could share with the city manager, just to, put it on paper in a way that it hasn't been. It's been shared verbally over time. And, but otherwise, I kind of was hoping Commissioner Vidor could start the discussion and see where the Commission wanted to take it. Obviously, at this point, we can't make it happen, but the Commission can express its full support for the concept of doing this and to offer assistance in any way possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think you said it quite well, and we all know that throughout all of our involvement in our history, distant history and recent history, we've come across process glitches and problems because we don't have good predictability about what the status of various buildings are in the community that haven't been defined either as part of a historic district or in any kind of an official survey. And this lack of predictability and lack of working systematically has created confusion and surprises for people, both in the community and developers who have projects pending, because they often can be interrupted by unexpected concern on the part of people in the community. So we need to move on with this, but recognizing that it's not easy and the funding is limited. I think some effort needs to be made to inventory what legitimate historic survey data we have, which may be part of the CRID database. I'm not sure where all of these data get integrated, but that we know what we have and that we come up with some kind of a priority plan to work on a survey piecemeal, and that, obviously we take areas or buildings that are at most of concern and look at it that way, so that we don't do a survey all at once, but we at least get started on it. I think it definitely involves people from the community and volunteers and interns and, ways to creatively work on this so that there isn't a huge financial impact, and that needs some discussion. If the community or the Historical Society is willing to engage in survey activity, and I've been a volunteer. We all have, I'm sure, at times volunteered for surveys. So the community has always come forward when there's a need to do surveys, and we could probably rally the community again, but it should be of the type that's binding and appropriate, and not of more the windshield. I know we have done many windshield surveys, but it would be preferable, in my view, not to engage in a survey that wouldn't have teeth in it should issues come up with respect to redevelopment or remodeling or any project activity. So, the right forms, the right process, the right approach would have to be taken. Usually that involves training, so that would have to be included in the process, or should be included in the process. I can't think of anything else I want to say at this point. I'd like to hear from other commissioners.
If I could just clarify one thing in terms of a windshield survey. Windshield surveys do have teeth. It is the basic form of survey. It basically means you're not touching the building, you're not doing background research on it, but it's the type of survey that's being done for Survey LA. It's kind of the standard survey type of survey for kind of broad range surveys. And what it does is identify buildings that appear to be eligible for at various levels of designation. It doesn't say a building is. There's still always going to be that next step that probably an owner would have to hire a consultant to do a focused survey on the property to verify whether that. But in terms of a citywide survey, I can't imagine that we'd ever have one at a higher level of kind of resolution in a windshield survey. But,
Okay, well, I'm just I'm not going to disagree with you.
It's officially called a reconnaissance survey.
Reconnaissance survey. Yeah, windshield survey was the wrong term,
that's what we
really,
all
because
say.
I meant it to be, when I said windshield survey, it's a very informal process. But if it's a documented reconnaissance survey, then it has the teeth it needs to have to set in motion whatever activities need to be set in motion right at the outset of a project proposal.
Right.
And that's the part, I think, that we all might agree sometimes we run into, where a project is quite well developed and suddenly people are unearthing information that was heretofore not understood, and then they have to stop their project and rethink it. So reconnaissance survey then, or something more, whatever.
Could we?
Can we open up the public hearing?
You may.
All right. Let's open the public hearing. Greg Grammer.
Yes, Greg Grammer with the Glendale Historical Society. And thank you for talking about this issue. It's something that the Historical Society has spent a lot of time talking about as well. And, we have a very engaged membership and a very active preservation advocacy committee. And the idea of at least starting the process of putting together a historic resources survey is something that we certainly would like to do and be a part of. We have decided that we'd like to focus on commercial buildings throughout the city, as those seem to be the ones that are the most threatened. So we certainly are ready and willing to work with the city in any way we can to facilitate this process. I will remind the Commission that there is a survey that was done as part of the downtown specific plan that does identify a number of buildings and homes as potentially eligible for listing on the Glendale and California Register. So we want to make sure that the city does look at those buildings as development is proposed in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And to answer that question about the DSP survey, yes, we use that survey regularly. We look at all of our surveys, and Commissioner Vidor asks what kind of inventory we have. We have compiled all of our surveys from the very first survey that goes back to, is there one earlier than 1983? I think there might be one earlier one, but we have a few decades worth of surveys. We include our surveys of historic districts, so as we get new information about properties, we're putting it together. Unfortunately, our CRID system, which we got a grant to update a number of years ago, that has been thrown into a bit of a limbo zone. We don't have staff who know how to work the one type of software that's required to work this thing, and that's kind of an information services issue. So we're talking in-house about possibly transferring the CRID information into a more usable database that we could actually update pretty much at staff level and understand how to use. That said, it's a priority, definitely, but with recent cutbacks, we haven't had time to really even focus on it. But we're very aware of the need to do it. But right now we have all of the documentation. We can find it in paper form, and a lot of the information is already on the CRID. So we have CRID up to a certain point in time, and then we don't have the more recent surveys on it. And then we also we don't have the very early ones where we only had paper documents. So we've scanned all of our paper documents, and they're ready to be put into a database, and hopefully we'll have that in sometime soonish. But we couldn't even give you an estimate right now. But just so everyone knows, we do use it regularly, and we're on top of that.
So do we have some kind, I know the downtown specific plan has sort of a map and a legend of the properties and at what level they may be. Contributing. But do we happen to have, I think you were talking about a lot of surveys and a lot of data. Do we happen to have a map of the, sort of a citywide map that shows what's been looked at? I don't even know how to really approach this topic, not having a sense of what, the whole looks like or where the gaps are.
And ideally, through geographic information systems, which we're working on right now to develop a better system than what we have, ideally we'll be able to click on a parcel at some point and find out, is it a designated parcel? Is it Glendale Register? Is it a contributor in the district? Has it been surveyed? All of that information will someday be in a GIS system, and that's what the database that we're talking about doing would integrate with the GIS, so there would be mapping capability. We're also currently working to just make sure that everything that we have, all of our historic districts are now in our GIS layer, so we have a separate layer for districts. We don't have all the Glendale Register properties in there, but we're working to do that. So we'll have that soon. We're not planning to do the surveyed properties at this point because that's part of the bigger picture of how the whole system is going to work. But that's definitely a goal.
Does the city currently own the GIS software that you're trying to get our data merged into, or?
Best I know.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, we own our licensed copies of ArcView, which is the dominant GIS platform.
ArcView.
And just to follow on what Jay said, part of the problem of generating the maps, which has been one of my ambitions even before Jay arrived to the city, is with CRID being in this database limbo, CRID doesn't integrate into the GIS software that we currently have. So that's part of the limbo system. So with it being in limbo, we can't tie them together and say, print me a map.
Yeah, right now we have
database. It's a big technology mess.
Yeah, we have a PDF for every single surveyed property that we've ever had surveyed, including buildings that are now lost. But we have the old survey form. The idea will be, just as easily as you pull up in PDF from anything, you click on this and you will get that survey form. If it's been surveyed many times over the years, you'll get all of the forms packaged together. So we definitely know we have the technology, we have the goal of doing it, and now we just need the time and staffing to get it done.
As they say with the $6 million man, we have the technology, we have the means, and we have the money. We're lacking the money, I suppose. I don't think it's $6 million, but...
Has there been any kind of a budget put together for what monetary figure we're looking for to get this?
Well, I've only recently learned, we have a GIS team that's moving forward with the whole system that planning is going to be integrated into, and they know that our historic stuff will be integrated into that. So it's an ongoing process. But we haven't had a meeting where we've said, okay, we've got all this stuff. How are we gonna put it in there? But I think it'll happen sometime soon. It's definitely moving forward.
Okay. Maybe you could just give us an update on that, because it seems like that's the best way to, one, evaluate what information we already have before we go out and try to survey things that we might already have the information on.
Sure, yeah. And any professional firm that does a survey, the first thing they do is see what's been previously surveyed. They see usually that information's out of date, so they have to resurvey it anyways. Oh. But there's a 5-year shelf life for survey data and preservation. So what I could do is add the GIS discussion to the commissioner topics, and then it'll stay on the list, and we can bring it up every so often.
Right. Thank you. Okay, shall we move to 8C? Update on future walking tour of the historic Civic Center area.
Future being the operative word. I was supposed to talk to you about this last month, but I completely forgot. When we were meeting with the Historical Society, we thought we'd started early enough to really get a great walking tour put together. Eileen contributed a lot to this. Christina Park worked on it. We worked with Marcia Hanford from the Historical Society. We walked the tour route. We think we have a solid tour. To get it to the point where we would have a very nice graphic package that wouldn't just last for the time of the tour, but would be something that we could put online, the group realized that we're not going to have time to do this by the May date that we had scheduled. So we are now looking at May 2014, but we're not going to just drop this right now and pick it up in April of next year. To that end, I'm soliciting, and I know there are potential changes on the commission, but what I would recommend to the chair is that we set up a working group that would include staff, members from the Historical Society, and possibly one or two commissioners, and that we could meet regularly, move this forward, get the text read by many different sets of eyes so that we have something that's fun and catchy and informative and really tells the story of downtown Glendale. And I would recommend that we, and I don't know that everyone who's seated at the dais now will be here next month or the month after that, but if there are any volunteers from people who feel that their position is probably safe, that would be great. Or we could do this next month when things kind of shake out.
I was going to say commissioners emeriti are also welcome.
Yeah.
Of course.
So yeah, it doesn't really matter as there's interested parties and people.
Right. Anyone. Yeah. Members of the public, please.
Yeah.
But we don't want to have a huge group.
Yeah.
And it's not a huge project. We've got a big head start. We've got almost all the information we need. It's really just putting it in a format that is a little more readable, a little more fun to read, and then really thinking through the graphics and creating a quality product.
And do you have resources at the city for the graphic presentation, or that we would outsource that?
We have resources, but we haven't determined it'll come out to a cost issue, what level of quality we can have, but we have a graphics department here. TGHS has graphics people volunteering who could help out for layout at least, so.
Okay.
Perhaps there are printers in the community who would be interested in helping out.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like a good idea to keep it on track for next year.
Yeah.
Are there commissioners that would be interested in being on the committee?
Should wait until.
Yeah.
If we wait till next month,
Wait till
that's
next
fine.
month? Okay, let's keep it on the agenda for next month.
Okay, so we'll agendize it. We'll call it the Walking Tour Working Group, something along those lines.
Okay.
And
Great.
all right.
Okay, that's our last agenda item. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
With a reminder that May 29th is our next meeting.
Be back May 29th, 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
And at 4:45.